The Warhammer 40k Grand Narrative event is rapidly approaching. I unfortunately did not get a ticket to that, but my friend Mike did, and he's going to be playing on the mercenary side, so if any of you are going, make sure you stop by and say hi to him. The thing I want to talk to you about today is preparing yourself for a gaming event like a tournament or a campaign weekend. I've been to lots of these, I've run lots of these, as I've mentioned in previous videos, so I think I've got a decent pack of advice to help you along. So buckle up and let's get started. How then do you go about preparing for a gaming event like this? Well, I'm going to assume if you're watching this video that perhaps you've not been to one or you only have been to a few. The most sensible piece of advice that I can give to you if you're going to be going to a tournament or a gaming event of that kind of nature is take an army that you have already painted. If, however, you are a masochist like me and a hobby butterfly and get distracted by new and shiny things, then you're probably going to want to start a new army in preparation for the event. How do I go about doing this? And I've done this numerous times, it's worth saying, for pretty much every tournament or campaign event I've gone to. I've gone, oh, this is the perfect time to paint a new army. First things first, you've obviously got to look at the rules pack for whichever tournament or campaign event you're going to. Find out what the requirements for your army are. Find out what the painting requirements for the event are. And then you've got to kind of tailor your plan around that. There are a couple of different ways to approach deciding what to take. I think obviously if it's for a tournament, then you're probably going to focus on getting the most competitive list that you can take. But equally, it's entirely possible you might focus on the list that's going to look the prettiest if instead, for example, you care more about getting like a best painted award or something of that nature. I like to try and theme my army around a particular narrative style. So even if I'm going to like a competitive tournament, I like to try and take a list that fits some form of vague storyline, because that's kind of what the hobby is to me. So, for example, I took to my Kelly's Heroes themed Imperial Guard army to a 40k doubles event, and everything was themed around kind of units from that army, albeit whilst still trying to make a vaguely competitive list. Equally, I went to another one where I took every single assassin model because I like the idea of doing an execution force like the Execution Force novel and the Nemesis Horus Heresy novel. What I would suggest is figure out what kind of army you want to take. So figure out, which army you perhaps will enjoy painting the most, which army you particularly enjoy playing with, and then write 5 or 6 different lists. And if you've got the time, maybe play those through with some friends. If you've got a friend who's got that army and is willing to lend it to you, or equally, you can always play it through with some proxies. Even if you can't play it through, what you can still do at the very least is just kind of crunch the army lists and look at what you feel you might be able to afford and also what you might enjoy painting. From preparing these different lists, you'll probably find that at the end of the day, you end up with one list that you're most happy with. And then obviously at that point, the thing to do is to work out how you're going to go about getting the contents of that list painted. There are a lot of different kind of ways in which you can approach an army project of this nature. How I would suggest there are really kind of 2 major ways in which you can approach a bulk army painting project like this. The first one of these is to simply break the army down into all of its kind of main colours for the colour scheme. So let's take a Black Templars army as an example. Say you were painting up a Crusade force to take to the 40k Grand Narrative. The most important thing you're going to be painting is a lot of black. So it is entirely possible you could simply spray undercoat your army and then sit down and grind through getting all of the black power armor done on every single model first. Then, next colour, let's say we're doing like yellow bolt guns. So then you go through and you do all the yellow. In this way, what you can assure is a consistency of the colour scheme across the whole army. What the downside to this is that you will probably find that by the end of it, you never want to paint that particular colour scheme ever again. In terms of the other approach, this is my personal preferred method, is to paint unit by unit, essentially. So pick, a Crusader squad, for example, if we're sticking with our Black Templars example, paint the entire unit to completion. Then pick the next unit from the army and paint that to completion. Now, the positive to this is it means that you get a bit of a variety to what you're painting. So although you're painting a whole army, you get, you paint the black, then the yellow, then the metal, then the white, then the heraldry, then the lenses, then the basing. So that by the time you circle back round to doing black on the next squad, you've had some other stuff that you've had the chance to paint to kind of keep your palette fresh. The difficulty is that it won't necessarily keep your palette fresh insofar as if, for example, there's a particular mix that you're doing for like a highlight, if you're not simply working out of the pots, then there is the risk that whatever mix you make the next squad that you do will not quite match the mix that you did on the previous squad. And this can be a little bit jarring if there is something that's just not quite right across the whole army. I still prefer this method as a way of approaching an army project, just because I enjoy getting that sense of completion from finishing a single, unit entry, for example, before I move on to the next one. But they both have things to recommend to it. What do you do, though, if you get, as I often find myself doing, close to the event and you still haven't finished painting stuff? Well, let's consider that for a moment. You know how it is. You've bought the ticket for the event, you've planned for months, gearing things up, getting your hotel room, doing all the things that you need to do. But sometimes painting just gets a little bit ahead of you, and before you know it, it's the night before the event, and you've still got half your army to paint. What do you do? I mean, how do you cope? I've asked the hobby community for some advice on this and for their own war stories, and I've certainly got my fair share myself. I have a distinct memory, for example, of sitting the night before a 6th edition tournament, desperately basing my army. Equally, I remember going to a 40k campaign weekend where I was desperately painting drop pods throughout the week before. If you're going to an event, then there's a number of things you have to kind of get yourself sorted on first. You have to work out, for example, how far away the event is, where you're going to stay, if you need to travel there, how you're going to get there. All of this includes, I would suggest, time that you can bake in to your preparation for last-minute hobbying. So let's take, for an example, if I were going to an event like the 40k Grand Narrative at Warhammer World, I'm probably going to have to find somewhere to stay overnight for a couple of nights. I'm probably going to want to stay the night before I get to the event so that I've got somewhere that I can, wake up fresh from and go straight to the event rather than having to leave my home at the crack of dawn and slog my way up to Nottingham. But also, I'm going to have to factor in how I'm getting there. My preferred method of travel is generally by train, because I can just, once I'm on, I can sit and away I go. It's great. Within that, then, there are a couple of different elements of kind of hobby time that I can bake into that for just last-minute planning and painting. The travel up there is one option, of course. The other is the time when you get there. If, for example, you arrive mid-afternoon the day before, there's nothing to stop you from going down to Warhammer World, grabbing yourself a seat there, or grabbing a spot in Bugman's, and just getting some hobbying done there. I've even had accounts from people who've had hobbying going on in the pub with their friends the night before. And in fact, one benefit to that, from the stories I have garnered from the hobby community, is an individual who turned up to an event with their army pretty much base-coated, but nothing more, only to discover that actually this was an event where you needed at least 3 colours on the models and the bases done. Call to action to the rest of the hobbyists in the pub who pitched in and single-handedly helped finish this guy's Space Marine army in a single night. That's an epic story, and also I think a great example of some of the camaraderie that you get from hobbyists at events like this. What I'm saying then is this: have a plan how you're going to approach to paint your army, but also have a plan about how you're going to pick up any last-minute snagging or any other last-minute issues. Again, I have a distinct memory, for example, of attending or planning to attend a Horus Heresy campaign event, spray purity sealing my army right at the end, my gloriously painted Sons of Horus army, only for everything to turn a very faint cloudy shade of grey. Luckily, somebody gave me a tip on how to resolve that, and I was able to fix it with only minimal corrective issues. But it was very equally possible that I might have had to sit there throughout the night before, desperately painting over some of the armour to try and fix some of the clouding issue that occurred. Places that you can hobby. You can obviously hobby at the venue if the venue is somewhere that's open the day before or the night before. Equally, you can hobby in your hotel room. There are games workshops in most towns, so if you need some last-minute hobby supplies, if you've got a crisis like this and you get to a game, you're going to a gaming event, you can always attend your local games workshop store or the local, hobby store if there's not a games workshop in town, or even if there is just a hobby store as well as a games workshop. And generally, you will find gamers who are willing to pitch in and help out. What about travelling up to the event, though? Well, like I said, I prefer to travel by train if I'm going to an event, and that then leaves me, hopefully, the prospect of being able to sit at a nice stable platform in like a train carriage and get some painting done there. It is equally possible, I suppose, to get painting done on, for example, the backseat of a car, or to get painting done, even if, I suppose, if you were flying to an event. I had a friend who went to the Las Vegas Open who was sat there desperately slapping a little bit of, basing material onto his models on the airplane. This all is building to something, therefore, and that is this. I have decided to test the best way in which you travel to an event if you need to get some painting done. Yes, this has all been a cunning spoiler for an upcoming special episode of 90% Geek, which will be going up on my Patreon very, very soon for anyone who wants to watch the full-length episode. In the meantime, it will then be making an appearance over the Christmas period as a Christmas special for 90% Geek. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and check that out. To get a little taste of what is going for it, have a little look here. In this episode, Mike looks at a plane, I get a little hot and steamy, and Lee looks for something in a bush. We've given you the fastest mode of travel to get your painting done.
What's this there?
Mike's going to be going in one of these. Is it fair to say that you're a fan of heights?
No, that's probably the one thing I'm actually scared of.
As you can see, we are in the amazing Firestorm Games, and you don't get much better than travelling by way of a steam locomotive. Yeah, welcome to the Watercress line.
Right, let's go. Well,
I don't know if you can hear that. There's a beautifully reassuring chuff, 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 chuff noise that is coming from outside the window as we make our way through this glorious green and sunny countryside.
so I'm going to just